guys, this is Taylor and I'm here today with my January wrap-up. January was a great reading month for me. I would even go so far as to say that it was kind of amazing. I read 6 books this month, but it was definitely less about quantity and more about quality. Spoiler alert, I think I might have a new top 10 favorite book of all time. So the very first thing I read at the top of the year was The Beautiful Bureaucrat by Helen Phillips. And I am so glad that I saw this on Book Outlet and decided to buy it because I enjoyed it so thoroughly. This is a novel about a young married couple who have kind of fallen on hard times, and our protagonist Josephine ends up taking a job at a place called The Database. In this office job, she does the same mundane task over and over again, and that very quickly begins to take a toll on her. There are multiple things that just feel off about this workplace. She has some strange occurrences take place, and just when she feels that she's actually beginning to lose her mind, her husband disappears. The main thing that I really enjoyed about this novel is the way that it's written. I have a Goodreads update where I just said that this book feels like anxiety compacted into words, and it kind of somehow managed to tap into all of my worst fears, like moving to a big city with just my partner and, you know, having to sustain myself by working a job that makes me feel like I'm losing my mind, and then my partner going missing on top of that. That is a worst case scenario for me. It is so claustrophobic and tense and strange. I recommended this to a coworker and she actually said that she couldn't read it when she was home alone because it wound her up too much. So if that is something that you tend to stay away from in a reading experience, I would not recommend this book. But if that is something that intrigues you, I would say absolutely check this out. I gave this a very solid 4 stars and it was a fantastic start to 2018. So then I read what I would consider to be the dud of January, and that was Dancing Girls by Margaret Atwood. This is her first ever short story collection, and I've had this copy since forever, like since dinosaur times. And this is a book that I have wanted to read simply because I have owned it for so long. But I was quite disappointed by this collection. For most of these stories, I just didn't understand what she was trying to do or what the goal was. And there were more than a few that had like really racist undertones. It was almost like she was trying to make some edgy statement about race, but it just came off as racist. I genuinely enjoyed maybe 2 stories in this collection, and they both did a great job of exploring things like feminine performance, where even if you're completely alone, it feels like some of your actions are performative. And most of these stories did exhibit good control over the mood, which I appreciated. But I was really not impressed by this collection at all. I gave it a 2-star rating, and that's really just for the 2 stories that I enjoyed. So at this part of the month, I was honestly just waiting for my pre-orders to come in. I didn't really want to start like a real book. So I ended up picking up the first volume of Mashiki Unique by Yu Watase. If this seems really random for me, that's because it is. Pretty much the only manga I ever read is Sailor Moon, and I just read it over and over again. But I know that this is a classic shoujo manga. I like the art style, and we had the first 2 volumes at the library. This is basically about a girl who is cramming for her high school entrance exams, and she is studying at the library when she opens a mysterious book and accidentally gets transported into the story of an ancient Chinese opera. The people in the story believe that she is a goddess who is foretold to be magically transported into their world, and the story unfolds from there. And I honestly really enjoyed this. I liked the characters. There was a good mix of action and humor, and the sense of humor was actually surprising and genuinely funny. I did try and pick up the second volume in the series, but there were so many pages ripped out, unfortunately, that it was kind of unreadable. So that sucks. But I'm obviously not a big connoisseur of manga at all, and so I'm kind of unsure as to my personal future with this series. But the first volume was a 4-star to me, so who knows? So at this point I was still waiting for my January releases to come in, and so I picked up a poetry collection. This is The January Children by Sophia Leo. Sophia is my favorite rising poet, and this is her debut poetry collection, and basically this was amazing. The title, The January Children, comes from the generation born in Sudan under British occupation, where children were assigned birth years by height, all given the birth date of January 1st. Sophia is Sudanese American, and this poetry collection is all about straddling multiple identities but never feeling truly balanced. I feel like I throw around the terms like it explores identity, but this truly got to the heart of things like identity in a way that I had never really experienced before. It had a real narrative flowing through it, and that narrative was heartbreaking and very eye-opening. The poems themselves play with words in Arabic that have double meaning. The verse is very free-flowing and expressive. I just loved the experience of reading this poetry collection, and I'm so excited that Sophia is so young and that she has presumably a very long career ahead of her. So the January Children got my very first 5-star rating of 2018. So then both Red Clocks by Lenny Zumas and Brass by Shana Aliu finally came in the mail, and I picked up Brass. This was my most anticipated release in a long time, and if anything, it exceeded my expectations. This is a dual perspective novel first set in Waterbury, Connecticut in the 1990s. Now, I live in Connecticut, maybe a half hour away from Waterbury, and I have seen it described as a depressed industrial town, which I think is pretty accurate. There is a lot of poverty, little to no opportunities, etc. We first follow Elsie, who is a recent high school graduate and the daughter of Lithuanian immigrants who is working at a diner. She falls in love with a married Albanian line cook who promises her the world, promises to leave his wife, and Elsie ends up pregnant. Simultaneously, we follow her daughter as a teenager who is trying to do better for herself and trying to understand more about her father and his family. If you recall when I read Shelter by Jung Yoon, I didn't shut up about it. It was my favorite read of the year, and since I read Shelter in June of 2016, I had not read anything as good until I read Brass. The author herself is Lithuanian and Albanian, grew up in Waterbury, and she really uses her own experiences to inform the text, and that just made it so incredibly raw and emotional. I was physically choked up for the entire last half of the book, and multiple times I just had to set the book aside and cry. This book is about so many things. It's about the cyclical nature of poverty, it's about culture, despair, hope. I wouldn't call it an absolutely perfect reading experience. The writing style was not my favorite, and there is a certain blunt sense of humor that almost borders on crude, but in terms of personal impact, this book moved me in a way that I could not even imagine when I first picked it up, and it is now a personal favorite and a very easy 5 stars. As you can imagine, I was very much experiencing a book hangover when I next picked up Red Clocks by Lenny Zumas. This is another of my most anticipated releases of 2018, and it follows 5 women in Oregon in the US who are living under very restrictive reproductive legislation. In vitro fertilization is illegal, abortion is illegal, and only married couples are allowed to adopt children. These women all have radically different personal circumstances, but these laws each affect their lives in a big way. I basically thought that Red Clocks was fine. I do think that it suffered from being overhyped. I didn't feel very emotionally invested in these characters, and for me, obviously that was in such direct contrast to Brass, where I was literally having crying fits. The structure of Red Clocks is vaguely experimental, but I think it could have pushed it more and done more with it, because even though I got used to the rhythm of the changing perspectives, I never really enjoyed the format. However, I of course still think that the subject matter here is still very important and necessary, and I think that the author's intention of exposing the human reality of laws like these is still very effectively done. I just would have liked to have felt more connected emotionally, like I said. For me, Red Clocks ended up being a 3-star book, but it's still a pretty solid 3 stars. So that was my January, and something I just want to emphasize is that I gave 2 5-star ratings this month, and last year in 2017 I gave 2 5-star ratings all year. So that's why I'm regarding this as such a stellar reading month, even though I had like a 2-star and a 3-star. So I mean, fingers crossed that this streak continues and that I keep really enjoying what I'm picking up. I kind of doubt it, but it was definitely a great start to the year. Feel free to let me know how your January went. Happy reading, and I'll see you very soon. Bye!